What do cruise lines really do with their empty cabins? Most passengers assume they stay locked for the whole trip, but the people who walk the decks and pay attention know something else, and you won't find it printed in the brochures. Let me explain. Every time a ship sails out of port, some cabins show as occupied in the system, but are actually empty. Last-minute cancellations happen, reservations drop off, and sometimes the cruise line holds back certain rooms on purpose. So what happens to those cabins? Some of them just sit there for the entire cruise, but some of them quietly change hands. And that moment when they change hands is the moment a door opens for the passenger who's standing in the right place. Before we go any further, I have to add this. An upgrade is never guaranteed. No one can honestly promise it to you. But if you've ever wondered why some passengers seem to get moved to better cabins again and again, while others never even hear about the opportunity, what I'm about to walk you through will help. The principles are simpler than you'd expect, but most people never apply them. First, you need to understand how the system itself works. Cabin inventory on a cruise ship is not static, it's constantly moving. The reservation system is always updating. When a passenger cancels, that cabin drops back into the pool. Sometimes that pool is in motion even just a few days before sailing. Cruise lines use those empty cabins in a few different ways. First, they try to sell them off with last-minute discounts. Second, they offer them to members of their loyalty program. And third, they open them up as upgrade opportunities for guests who are already booked. That third door is the one most people don't even know exists. Now think about this. Imagine a ship that can carry 3,000 passengers. Let's say it sails at 95% capacity. That leftover 5%, how many cabins does that represent? Roughly 75 to 100 cabins. Are all of those available for upgrades? No. But some of them are, and the passengers who end up in those rooms usually aren't just lucky. They're the ones who know how to move on purpose. So what does it actually take to walk through that door? The first step is all about timing. When you check in matters. When online check-in opens, the passengers who jump in right away are usually considered early, and that's great for many reasons. But if we're talking specifically about upgrade chances, the picture changes a bit. People who check in very early get locked into their cabins in the system. The guests who wait a bit longer, especially those who check in a few days before the cruise, sometimes end up in a different category in the computer. Why? Because by that point, the cruise line has a clearer picture of its cabin occupancy and is actively looking for ways to use any empty higher category rooms. Does this trick work every time? No. But passengers who understand timing run into these offers far more often than those who don't. What if you check in too late? That's where the risks go up. If your cabin assignment is delayed or the system has to scramble to place you, problems can appear. The key is to find the balance. Not so early that everything about your booking is frozen forever, and not so late that you're an afterthought. Somewhere in that window where the cruise line is finalizing its inventory is usually the sweet spot. Then there's what happens in the port. Embarkation day, the day you board, is full of critical hours for upgrades. Most passengers rush to the terminal early in the morning and want to get on the ship as soon as possible. The excitement is totally understandable. But at that time of day, the guest services desk doesn't yet see the full picture. They don't know exactly how many people won't show up or how many cabins will end up empty. In the afternoon, especially 2 or 3 hours before sail away, things become much clearer. That's when the passengers who walk up to guest services and politely ask if there are any upgrade options available sometimes get a surprise. And by surprise, I don't mean some wild promise. It might be a simple move 1 deck higher with an ocean view window, or a paid offer to switch into a balcony cabin at a fraction of the usual difference. How many people do you think actually do this? Very few. The vast majority of guests step on board, head straight to their cabin, wait for their luggage, maybe try to grab a good spot by the pool. They walk past the guest services desk over and over again without ever stopping. Yet sometimes all it takes is a 5-minute conversation. The way you communicate is critical here. Guest services staff deal with hundreds of passengers every single day. Most of them are complaining, demanding, or in a hurry. In that atmosphere, a calm, polite, and realistic guest stands out immediately. There's a subtle but powerful difference between demanding an upgrade and asking whether any upgrade options are available. The first approach creates expectation and usually ends in disappointment. The second one keeps the door open and gives the person behind the desk room to share what they actually have. Picture this. You're the employee at the desk and two guests walk up. The first one says, "You need to upgrade me. I paid a lot for this cruise." The second one says, "Hi there. I was just wondering if there happened to be any upgrade options available today. If so, I'd be happy to take a look." Which person are you more inclined to help? Almost everyone picks the second one. I remember one guest. Let's call him Murat. He was sailing the Mediterranean with his family. They had booked an inside cabin, a standard room with no window. On embarkation day, later in the afternoon, after most people had already settled into their staterooms, he stopped by guest services. He said something like this: "Hi, I had a quick question. Are there any upgrade options available for today by any chance? Paid or complimentary doesn't matter. I'm just curious." The crew member checked the system and saw that a balcony cabin had opened up that day because of a cancellation. The price difference was very low because the cabin hadn't sold anyway. Murat and his family spent that night in a balcony cabin. The extra amount he paid was less than half of what that cabin's normal daily difference would have been. Does this happen every time? Of course not. But if Murat hadn't asked, that door would never have opened. Now let's shift to another angle. Loyalty programs. Most cruise lines have some sort of membership system. The more you sail, the higher your status climbs. And as your status climbs, your priority for upgrades tends to rise with it. Here's the interesting part. A huge number of passengers don't even bother signing up, not even on their very first cruise. Yet registration is free, and it can give you benefits from that very first sailing. It doesn't guarantee an upgrade, but it makes you visible in the system. Cruise lines like to reward loyal guests because repeat customers are incredibly valuable to them. Let me share a simple truth. Across many companies, guests who are enrolled in the loyalty program get upgrades at a noticeably higher rate than those who aren't. Again, that doesn't mean a promise. It just means the odds are better. And because membership is completely free, there's really no reason not to raise your hand and be counted. There was another guest. Let's call her Elif. It was her very first cruise, but she had done her homework. She enrolled in the loyalty program, filled out her profile completely during online check-in, and on embarkation day, she introduced herself at guest services. She didn't ask for anything special. She just mentioned that it was her first cruise and that she was excited to be on board. That night, she found a small surprise in her stateroom. A little welcome package the line sometimes sends to new members. It wasn't an upgrade, but it showed what it means simply to exist in the system and to communicate. On her second cruise, her status will already be one step higher, and she'll be just a little higher on any upgrade list too. So what should you do when an upgrade is offered to you? Sometimes cruise lines email guests before the trip with an upgrade opportunity. This is often called a bid upgrade. You decide how much extra you're willing to pay, put in your offer, and the company looks at all the bids and chooses which ones to accept. In this system, extremely low bids usually don't go anywhere because the company sets a minimum threshold. Extremely high bids just mean you're overpaying. Experienced cruisers tend to pick a reasonable middle number and see what happens. If their bid is accepted, great. If not, they still keep their original cabin. There's another advantage to the bid upgrade system. It positions you as a guest who is open to options and thinking ahead. Even if your offer isn't accepted, you've sent a signal into the system. And some cruise lines pay attention to that signal on embarkation day as well. They may decline your offer today, but come back with a different opportunity tomorrow. There is one important thing to watch for. Once a bid upgrade is accepted, going back to your old cabin is usually not an option. That means you may not know your new room's exact location, deck, or surroundings beforehand. Sometimes you can end up with a balcony in a noisier area of the ship. Whether you're okay with that risk is entirely up to you. Before you bid, it helps to think through the worst-case scenario. Then there are special occasions. Anniversaries, birthdays, honeymoons. These matter to cruise lines because making those moments memorable creates long-term loyalty. Mentioning these occasions when you book or during check-in can sometimes open the door to little gestures. It doesn't always mean an upgrade. It might show up as a handwritten card in your cabin, a bottle of sparkling wine, or a special table setup at dinner. In some cases, though, it really does lead to an upgrade offer. The company looks at how full the ship is that week and decides what they can do. The key is not to exaggerate. Claiming a different celebration on every single cruise gets noticed and starts to look insincere. If you have a genuine occasion, absolutely mention it. If not, don't force it. These details do get noted, and companies recognize the guests who seem to be celebrating something a little too often. Let's talk for a moment about what doesn't work. Begging for an upgrade, insisting you deserve one, or claiming you have a right to it almost never leads anywhere. Guest services teams are trained to handle these kinds of requests with polite, standard answers. Threatening to complain on social media doesn't move the needle either. In fact, that kind of behavior can get you flagged in the system, and that's the last thing you want. There's another pattern you'll sometimes see. A few guests intentionally look for problems during check-in, nitpick every detail of their cabin, or manufacture complaints in the hope of scoring an upgrade. This strategy almost always backfires. Giving an upgrade to a guest who complains like that sends the message that complaining is rewarded. Most cruise lines work very hard not to fall into that trap. The things that actually increase your chances of an upgrade are usually simple and very human. Being polite, being patient, keeping your expectations realistic, and taking the time to understand how the system works. When those 4 things come together, your cruise is almost always better, whether you get an upgrade or not. The right attitude doesn't just open doors to better cabins, it changes the feel of your entire trip. There's one more topic I want to touch on. Sometimes the location of your cabin matters more than the cabin itself. Moving up to a higher deck isn't always an upgrade in real life. Some upper decks can be noisy because they're close to the pool or busy public areas. Certain balcony cabins are placed in very windy spots where using the balcony is harder. That's why when an upgrade is offered, it's worth asking where exactly the cabin is. A savvy cruiser pays attention not just to the category, but to the position. On many ships, cabins close to the top decks are seen as more prestigious, but midship, mid-deck cabins often feel the motion of the ocean less. If you're sensitive to seasickness, that's a huge detail. Sometimes an upgrade moves you higher up the ship, but not necessarily into a more comfortable experience. You have to weigh all of it. Another guest comes to mind. Let's call her Aisha. She received an offer to upgrade to a balcony cabin and accepted it immediately. Only later did she realize the cabin was right under the nightclub. Music thumped until midnight every night. Her old inside cabin had been in a much quieter area. Getting an upgrade isn't always winning. Sometimes it just means a different kind of experience. After that trip, Aisha made a new rule for herself. On the next offer, she would always ask about the cabin's location before saying yes. Let me finish with this. An upgrade is like a gift. It's wonderful when it shows up without being the center of your plans, but it's not healthy to build your whole vacation around it. The real value of a cruise lies not in the square footage of your cabin, but in the experience as a whole. Being in the right place at the right time and showing up as a kind and informed guest will always set you apart. Just don't let the chase for an upgrade steal the joy of the trip itself. On embarkation day, take a moment to stop by guest services, ask politely about any options, and if the answer is no, smile and move on. If the answer is yes, your day just got a little better. Enroll in the loyalty program. Keep your profile complete. Mention your special occasions. But do it to open the door to opportunity, not because you feel entitled to a reward. Can these small steps lead to big results? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But they're always better than taking no steps at all. Everything I've shared with you so far comes from experience and observation. Every ship operates a little differently. Every company has its own policy. Every sailing has its own dynamic. There is no magic formula that guarantees a result. But if you've ever wondered why some people always seem lucky, it's often because what looks like luck is really preparation and awareness. So which approach do you want to try first? Talking to guest services on embarkation day? Putting in a bid for an upgrade? Or maybe simply joining the loyalty program and taking that first step? If you share your own experiences in the comments, they'll be incredibly valuable, not just for me, but for everyone watching. The story of your cruise might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this video was helpful, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you subscribe, you won't miss the next cruise tips we share here. If you have questions, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer. Until the next video, happy sailing.